like to share some of his background with you. He was born in Chicago, pleasantly parked in the Midwest, but shortly thereafter went to New York, where he and his family became part of the York Center Community Cooperative.
That was actually outside Chicago.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Wow, great. Well, it's so it was founded by the Church of Brethren, who invited people of all races and religions to live together as a witness for peace and brotherhood. From there, he went to the University of Michigan and later became a spiritual teacher of Adida Samraj and was a formal devotee for 15 years. He then founded Tools for Wellness, which brought together in one place, sort of like a whole earth catalog, emerging brain, mind, machine, subtle energy tools, and other cutting edge technologies for expanding awareness. He became a teacher and senior associate of the Integral Institute in 2004, where he worked closely with Ken Wilber and a core team to develop integral life practices. Later, he went to John F. Kennedy University and received his MA in Consciousness Studies. And there he analyzed how higher levels of awareness can be fostered by integral coaching. He was, in 2007, he launched a website now called terrypatten.com that engages our critical evolutionary moment, exploring the perspectives and practices that can cultivate a life of greater awareness, growth, freedom, vitality, service, and ultimately love. And he is author of Integral Life Practice, New Republic of the Heart, and Being the Change, his very hot off the presses book, exploring discoveries from a year-long living laboratory. Terry travels widely, speaking, teaching, consulting, challenging and connecting leaders and institutions worldwide. He hosts the acclaimed online teleseminar called State of Emergence. So it is a great pleasure to have you with us today, Terry. Do you have any fresh in joining us words you want to share before we go into some questions that are pressing?
Well, I'm really just meeting you all. I gather that you're a community of practice inspired by creation spirituality of Matthew Fox, and I feel a lot of resonance with that. I think that in a way, all of us who are recognizing where we are trying in whatever ways we can to embody some sort of next stage, another level of consciousness, relationship, practices, understandings. And I think we're all aware that the bar is high, that what we already know is not enough, and we're becoming more interested in what we don't know than what we do. And in that openness, that beginner's mind, a lot becomes possible. And so I'm inviting us all to just enter into that. We know a lot, we have a lot of thoughts, but in a way, sometimes our thoughts are between us and the real possibilities. And so I want to, just receive you and look at you all and invite you to be fully present and to feel and for there to be a chance for something new to come into being as we're here together.
Thank you. Perhaps a good place to start would be how you would define we space.
Well, actually I have it right here. There's a book that was published, 4 or 5 years ago at least, I think, 2016, Cohering the Integral We Space, and it's kind of an academic book. It's got, 15 or so chapters. So there's a sense of really, it's all about human relating being something that can evolve, that our ways of being with one another are under evolutionary pressure right now. And right now, you know, you're having an experience, I'm having an experience, and there's also something in between. There's the we, there's a field, there's something more than my experience and your experience. And that we is itself something that needs to and is evolving and awakening. And that has a really vital relationship to something we're also probably aware of, that our separated ways of being are not working, and that a whole new and much more coherent, you know, the word love is, you know, it's the one our hearts recognize, and it is a beautiful word in a way, but maybe not precise enough sometimes. And for love to operationalize itself such that what is best in us has the power and natural authority to be effective in the midst of fragmented society in crisis, with collective traumas and cycles of abuse and reaction and resentment all patterned through the human collective, how that coherence becomes coherent enough and powerful enough that it actually can reorder and bring, you know, it's like wholeness reasserting itself amidst a crisis of fragmentation through us. And in a way, we've all been given an impossible question, a koan by life, like how do we respond to this? And my response to it doesn't matter, neither does any other individual's. It's our response that matters. And that's what We Space is about, really taking it seriously together to practice something new.
Many breakthroughs along your path have gotten you to your place in this moment in time. But on this day, in this moment, which comes to mind as a breakthrough moment that puts you here in the midst of the social experiment, your writings? What bubbles up?
Single moment.
Or teacher.
Well, certainly my root guru, Adi Da, was like a, you know, very profound transmission of wholeness in a certain way. Also, he gave me a very complex inheritance that has been a bit of a puzzle to find a way to live in relationship to a world that is pretty much decided the age of the guru is over. I think it might be a moment. There's a story I often tell. I was a very active a student activist at the University of Michigan, and I had led a number of marches, and we occupied a couple of buildings, and we were protesting against universities' endowment being partially invested in South African countries, you know, anti-apartheid demonstration back in the 70s, early 70s. And I remember, let's go march on the president's home. You know, my fist was in the air. And sure enough, you know, 4,000 of us go swarming around the president's home. And as we were shouting our chants, I saw a woman in an upstairs, you know, somebody probably about my age now, looking like she was under siege, very stressed out, kind of trying to pull the shade with all these students marching around her home. And it became obvious to me that I might be right about the evils of apartheid, but I didn't know very much about how to truly bring about change. Like, I would have to become a different person. I was an arrogant adolescent, perfectly willing to inflict this fear on this woman. And that wasn't good enough. And if I wanted to have a social impact, I had to become a different kind of human being. And I think that was an important moment in my development too.
Wow. You were young to learn that lesson. So I've been a part of the social experiment since February, and there are things that you grok over time versus understand immediately. And this is my opportunity to ask questions that have bubbled up. And one is your term for first followership. I would love you to say more about that.
Sure. Well, the term comes from a video that went viral on the web, a YouTube video. You can find it. You just Google first followership. And basically it's a community organizer narrating a film of some people on a hill overlooking where the band is playing at a big music festival. And most of them are just sitting there watching the band play and enjoying their time. And then there's one guy over at the edge of the area that's being filmed who's just dancing, not like particularly gracefully, just kind of really into it. And he's just dancing his head off and just having a good old time. And everybody just sort of looks at him and nothing changes for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And then one other guy gets up and he starts dancing along with the first guy. And just a little while later, somebody else gets up. And within a minute or so, the whole crowd is on their feet dancing. And so the idea is that a movement is not created by the first person who starts something. It's by the power of saying, no, I'm going to cohere with something. I'm going to follow. And that, and it relates to an idea that I also talk about, yin leadership, feminine leadership. Because we have this incoherent and fragmented moment in society, we tend to define ourselves and identify with our uniqueness and our differences. And there's real leadership in finding commonalities and emphasizing them, following rather than initiating. And I think the first followership kind of opens into a very rich consideration about our own ways of intending to be of benefit.
Being of benefit, I think I first heard that, I believe, in Buddhism. Is that, you take from a number of traditions, and can you say a little bit more about being of benefit, but also Sobet? That was another one that came along.
Well, those are both worth talking about. I think that all of you, all of us, anybody who would want to be on in a meeting like this one cares, and we want to make a difference. And so the simplest and most universal way of expressing that is being of benefit, I think. And that opens up, like in one moment, I might think I can be of benefit in a particular way. And then as my awareness evolves and my perception of reality deepens, I discover that my way of being of benefit also evolves. But it's always going to be a matter of being of benefit. So it's a very universal, and it's almost primal. Like, I think we get at a certain point that our wealth is based on what we give away, not what we keep. And that desire to give more and to hold back less becomes more primary. So bet is it's either an Arabic or a Turkish word. It mostly has come to us through the Turkish Sufi tradition. And it is a practice in some Sufi orders of sacred conversation. It's what Rumi and Shams Tabriz were up to. It's where the conversation itself becomes charged with the tender pre-verbal meanings that arise in the intelligence of the heart and that are so delicate and tender that they can barely be spoken, but somehow the heart finds a voice that cuts through all the noise, and that delicate, tender quality in the heart of the other enters in. And when you are in that kind of a conversation, you're transformed. And it's a central practice in the social experiment.
Does this relate at all to your work with heart math? And can you say more about that experience for you and how it informs today?
When the folks at Heart Math really first got going, and I think they started in the very end of the 80s, beginning, maybe I met them in 1990, I believe. I just liked them. And they have a place I can drive to down in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and they invited me down and I had a good time. I just liked them. And you may know a lot about this Institute of Heart Math. I mean, their basic idea is that the heart is a center of intelligence in the human system, and that it is more intuitive and wiser than the head center. That there are fields of, in addition to cognitive neuroscience, all the different cerebrally oriented ways of looking at the brain and the head. There's neurocardiology, which does study the cluster of nerve endings and the way they operate in the human system around the heart. And there's a third brain, the neuroenterology, the brain in the gut. And what I teach is integral heart intelligence, which is the synthesis of them all. I don't think it's a matter of moving from the head to the heart, but a matter of integrating all the intelligence. We need everything we've got to deal with our meta crisis. We're in an existential moment. We are being forced into something radically new beyond what any of us can figure out. It's not a problem to figure out. It's something to meet with all our presence, all our intelligence, all that's truest and fullest in our being. And that is our integral heart intelligence. It happens to be that it is at the level of the heart that we integrate our visceral intelligence centered in the hara and our mental intelligence centered in the head. The head is easy to fool. You get people with super smart, complex ideas and all the rest, and they veer into all kinds of madness. It's when it's all integrated at the heart that we really are a lot wiser and harder to fool.
And maybe this relates, it's another of your quotes. Our collective nervous system is surging with adrenaline, jolted again and again by breaking news and visions of apocalypse. Can you say something about the collective nervous system?
You know, I think it was Peter Russell, the futurist, who first coined the term the global brain. And lots of people now are talking about how, in some sense, we're all each conscious cells in a larger global human intelligence. And when I wrote those words, I was talking about we're in when I just say meta crisis, it's like an idea, but there's a concept in philosophy. I think it's Timothy Morton's philosophy puts forward the idea of a hyperobject. Climate change is a hyperobject. Our meta crisis is a hyperobject. By meta crisis, I'm talking about this multidimensional ecological emergency, the breakdown of all of our social and cultural institutions, the epidemics of addiction and depression, and you go on and on and on. I could offer a litany of everything that's at some sort of a breaking point. That's the meta crisis. But in a sentence, I'll say meta crisis, and you'll remember, if that's a term you're used to, you'll remember what you think it means, but you don't see it all. It's like climate change. We say climate change, we have an idea of what climate change is, but how that might affect the quality of soil and what happens to food, and then what happens to people, and refugee flows, and depletion of freshwater aquifers, and wars, and the traumas that come from them, and we can't see it all. You could never see it all. A hyperobject is beyond what we can see. And the aspect of that meta crisis that I was pointing to in that passage is the way that human culture has been turbocharged again and again in recent years. We were turbocharged by science and the Industrial Revolution. Then we were turbocharged again by the development of, well, all of our abilities to influence one another. And once the free market recognized that it could manufacture demand for things we didn't even really want, so that we began to get bombarded by advertisements, and now we're submerged in a virtual reality much of the time, and many of the messages coming to us are intentional disinformation and manipulation of one kind or another. All of them are most effective when they give us a jolt of supernormal stimuli. Evolutionary scientists found that certain birds that lay maybe a largish blue speckled egg will sit on an even larger, even bluer, even more visibly speckled wooden egg in preference to their own. The supernormal stimulus registers on them in a way that causes them to abandon their young, or they'll mate with a fake insect that just has exaggerated features of the male or the female, depending on who you're talking about. Well, ever since we started, the world was settled in a search for silks and spices, nicer things. And we've continued on that trajectory, and it's just gone through one of those hockey stick graphs. So now you're living in a world in which, TV has all these quick cuts. Like you look, because there's an orienting response. We've reverse engineered our body mind. And therefore we are constantly barraged with all kinds of things that are intended to hijack our nervous systems, and we're dysregulated by that. So this reassertion of wholeness in the midst of this crisis of fragmentation is a fractal. We each have to enact it in many, many, many moments in regard to many, many different fragmenting influences in every single relationship. We have to constantly be a student of how that wholeness can be lived and sustained. Every one of us is succeeding to some degree, but falling short in different ways. And the kind of maturity and self-compassion and other compassion that it takes for us to reestablish and reknit and reassert wholeness in the midst of this crisis of fragmentation is wild and multidimensional.
Well, maybe this is a great time to mention what you talk about. We are each the divine, and we each have a cartoon character. I have fallen in love with that. I think it drops off a lot of conversation that we don't need to have internally. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. There are these two practices that I have done and do and recommend. And one of them is to look at others with golden eyes. Yes, you can see that this person may have various limitations, and you might know this, or you might have matured in regard to this quality or whatever, more than that person. But there is a pervasive cultural habit of looking at people and seeing their limitations instead of seeing their divine qualities. And there are ways in which every other human being is more developed or loving or mature or patient or humble or whatever than you are. And if we orient to one another, looking with golden eyes, we'll be way more curious about their divinely human qualities than we are about their limitations. We encounter their
Excuse me for a
divinity.
minute.
Terry, excuse me just a second. Kay Duran, you've just come in and your microphone is on.
I'm
And
sorry, I've got to
interrupt-
leave, but thank you.
Oh, okay, okay.
Thank you.
Glad you're here. Okay. Thank you.
Please continue.
Sure. So this practice of looking at others with golden eyes is profound. I mean, it goes on your whole life because there are so many ways in which we are wired to look at people as if they are merely their limitations. So breaking that pattern, it's fed to us. The way people make fun of one another and ridicule one another, it's all based on breaking our contact with the revelatory, amazing, living, divine spirit that is present in each other human being. And waking into that again and again is a very central and important practice. It's also true, though, that we do notice all those foibles. They are there. And the reason that they are there is that every human being, myself included, everyone, is a cartoon character also. We're all a little goofy. And the most ridiculous thing about us is the way we kind of act like we've got it together. Like the cartoon character becomes even more preposterous putting on the suit or the putting on the dog of, yes, I've got it together. No, I know exactly who I am and what is going on here. No. We're all, there's only cartoon characters. This is Toontown. Let's accept that, bless that, and enjoy that. And that sense of humor really does you a lot of good. So I actually sometimes ask people to do a specific practice. This was back before we were homebound in the pandemic, but in a public space, observing people, take a moment to just bring a kind of warm, loving amusement to all the cartoon characters around you. And then shift your view and imagine that all those foibles that now are very obvious to your eyes, let them become background and let yourself foreground the fact that there's a precious, truly divine soul and radiance and intelligence available in each of these people, and just look at that. And shifting these foreground backgrounds just wake you up to the real paradoxical nature of this miraculous life and the gift of relating to other souls.
It's beautiful and fun. So one of the things early on that you introduce to the community are the practices, the 5 M's. And I wondered if you could walk us through mornings, moments, mission, milestones, and momentum.
Yeah, I'll try to do that in an economical way. These are the way that I offer a really quick summary of the practices of integral practice as I teach it. Now, I wrote a book with Ken Wilber called Integral Life Practice. And that book really focuses on what are called modules of practice in the book. And it says, you have body practices, mind practices, spiritual practices, shadow practices. Those were the core modules we wrote about. And as I taught that for many years before I reformulated integral practice into the 5 M's. And I came to feel, number one, that practice is not a program of self-improvement with modules, and I'm going to have one from column A, B, C, and D. No, 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 no. Life is practice. All of life is practice. Every single moment is a moment in which you can, to some degree, show up a little more at your best or a little less at your best. You can go on autopilot, you can get reactive, you can wake out of it, you can find the virtue that the moment requires. And if every moment is a moment of practice, and that's your fundamental understanding of what practice is about, then we can talk about practices. So with that understanding, what are the forms? If you want to be a practitioner that is more integral, it's doing a richer, more multidimensional practice, what do you recommend? Well, first thing is practice every day. Sit in prayer, meditation, contemplation for at least, I say to people who might not already have the habit, at least 10 minutes. Obviously, longer periods of meditation are also, especially beneficial. And I also say spend at least 10 minutes with conscious movement, conscious exercise, usually with the breath and feeling. And do that every day. Usually people do that in the morning, so I call that morning's practice. But it's just a daily practice, and some people might not do it in the morning. That's okay. The second thing is moments. And that means that as we're waking up to the fact that every moment of life is practice, we notice that, boy, do we forget that a lot. Boy, do we need to awaken from our habits more intentionally. So at the beginning, I ask people, make a point of interrupting whatever you're doing for a moment 3 times a day. And what you do in that moment could, you define it. You're free to define it. Like I often teach heart breathing, which is a practice very similar to heart math practice, where you breathe to, let's just do it. It's more fun than talking about it. So put your hand on your heart and just close your eyes for a moment. Yeah, and breathe to your heart and from your heart. And as you're breathing to and from your heart, let yourself just very naturally experience the fundamental okayness of being. Sometimes it's easier to do that by imagining that you're holding a purring kitten or re-experiencing some beautiful place or someone you love, holding a grandchild, a lot of things that can trigger it, but just come into physiological coherence, breathing to and from your heart. That's a really powerful practice that you can do in just a moment. And so I often suggest that people do that at first. But you might be in the midst of a practice like, hey, I've got to change my posture. You do that 3 times a day. Or you might decide that there's, you may be an advanced meditator and you may be able to just summon awakened awareness, and you do that 3 times or many, many times a day. That's moments practice, the interruption of your habit pattern by an intentional practice. So I think that the universals of practice are practice every day, but also practice randomly in random moments. In addition to that, though, we are all here for a reason. We have a higher purpose. And letting yourself orient to your own true north so that you have a sense of how you are, what has called you here, what your unique offering is, what touches your heart, what calls you. And that's mission. And a lot of times people will try to speak, have a sentence, my life purpose is, or my mission is. I don't always do that, but that can be a useful practice. But whatever it is, it's going to evolve because you're going to evolve. And so that whole matter of recalibrating and reorienting yourself to your true north so that you can be of benefit, your creativity, your courage, your whatever, your own medicine is being offered purposefully. That's mission. But of course, that's a very big abstract thing. That's important, and it's important to continue to have that compass. But the way we do it is through what I call milestones, which are like the projects. Like right now, meeting here together is a project for at least some of you. And so that's a milestone. Writing a book, putting up a website, maybe a deep engagement with, it can be anything as simple as maybe, I mean, some of these things are not so simple, but, getting a degree, creating a piece of music, putting on a major event or a small event, building a garden, conceiving a child, finding a life partnership, raising a child, transforming a garden. All those things can be milestones projects. And what makes them a real practice is, one, you do them in service of something greater than yourself. Two, you do them in partnership with grace, with that all-accomplishing power of the universe. And that is, the person who starts this milestone, this project, may I be changed by the way I do it, so that the person who finishes the garden is a little more whole, more conscious, more loving, more masterful in some way than the one who started it. Those attitudes make a milestones practice. And the last one, momentum, was a word I used to point out that there are other practices that are very important to do every day. And those practices are like the modules of the integral life practice I wrote about with Ken. But I don't use the word modules anymore. I call them spheres, because really just approaching all of life as an occasion for practice means that you're not doing a self-improvement project and you're doing these modules. No, you're recognizing that there are inherent spheres of practice. So meditation, yeah, or maybe devotional singing, or prayer, or there are all kinds of things that can express your spiritual sphere of your life. The spheres that I name are body practices, which includes diet and sleep and various kinds of exercise, gross exercise and subtle exercise like yoga or Tai Chi. Psychosphere, where you're, maybe going to psychotherapy session is a practice. Working with shadow, working in your relationship on the issues that are shadow. There are mental practices, just keeping sharp, reading, educating yourself. These are all, so the spheres I name are body, mind, spirit, psychosphere, but then also intimate relationships and your civic responsibilities. These are just as essential spheres of our practice as the more personally focused practices, especially in the midst of our meta crisis. So that's what I mean, all of that by momentum.
Thank you. That was helpful. I'd like to use our last few minutes before we open it to other questions for a conversation about the social experiment, what you've learned, and what you are learning. And you've written a book about it, and I don't know if you want to start there, or what was the evolutionary impulse even that led you to initiate such a project?
Well, I'm so keenly aware of what time it is on the planet. And even as we mature, we grow in our ability to trust life itself, but we also end up remembering that we are participants. We are shaping it. And this point I made before when I was talking about we space, about how we're being asked an impossible question, a koan, a Zen riddle by life. How can this out of control humanity turn a corner into a healthy, sustainable, just, and fulfilling way of being human? It seems impossible, but we have to try. How do you do that? Well, I realized that as much as I was clarifying it and becoming a source of important distinctions and practices, that really I needed to attempt to do it with others, that we had to try together to be the change in a way that got to a level of coherence that broke through to another level of coherence, became even more coherent. This is like the way you are right now, it's good, but it needs to go through a phase change. The way we are as friends, that's good, but we could be better friends. This conversation I'm having with you, my dear friend who I've known for 40 years, let's not just do what we always do. Let's imagine that in this moment, something new can happen. That sense that we can upgrade it, that had to be done by groups of people. People had to come together and say, okay, fresh slate, can we break through? And that would be a social experiment. After I wrote my book, which I always have behind me, A New Republic of the Heart, I did a bunch of publicity on it, and I did a course on the book. And then in the way I had made my living up until then, the thing I should have done would have been to have offered an advanced course on the book. And I realized, no, this old model of teachers and students, service providers, service consumers, we've got to break through into something where the heroism, that yin heroism, that everything best in one another comes forward, and we try to break into another level of coherence. And to do that is a social experiment. Well, the people who were listening to me were distributed around the world, so I decided to do it as an online thing. And I came to it at the end of 2018. And so I said, well, let's make 2019 a year of radical commitment, and let us do the inner work, the outer work, the interpersonal work, and the spirit of radical commitment, and see what we can do. So we went for it, and we used we had Zoom meetings, we had an online Mighty Networks community, we had a place where you could get your, we would offer things like a course, like very specific practices and readings and handouts and all that kind of thing. And people would meet with one other person every week, and they'd meet with a little group of about 5 every other week, and they'd meet in the whole group the week they weren't meeting with the 5. And we would try to give everybody a rich enough set of practices, like a course, that we would be at the level where maybe we could break into something better. Well, we did that for a year, and we've just come out with the report on it. That's what this is, Being the Change. I'm really proud of it. I think that we learned some things, especially about we space, I think that this coherence and this and this spirit, this loving spirit of possibility, we find some really, really useful practices. And I highly recommend your getting it. And I think the whole book is really worthwhile. You might especially value the discussion and conclusions or the we space section, because I think we break out in a very meticulous way how, if you know, it takes, like anything else, you know, practice doesn't happen by itself. You've got to bring intention, and it takes some application. But if a group of people says, okay, let's go for it. Let's try to create virtuous cycles, upward spirals, where by my relationship with you, by my way of listening to you, you are empowered and you realize you fulfill your potential way more, and you are of benefit way more because of me. And if all of us do that with one another, a group of 5 can become an amazing, amazing crucible of mutual empowerment and transformation. And right now, as you know, Penny, I mean, things are really popping. Our social experiment is on a pretty healthy boil, I'd say. There's a lot of initiatives, a lot of creative projects, a lot of amazing meetings people are having, and it's challenging me. I mean, you know, people are not. I said, let's go beyond the teacher-student model, and they're definitely sometimes feeling a little like they need to, you know, take a shot at me in order to have room for their own expression. And I actually feel really good about how it's all working out. I signed up for that. That's okay.
That's great. I want to share this. You said this in the first webinar that got me involved. And this is the word that keeps me involved and excited, and because my rational mind can't see how we can do this. My mechanistic cause and effect mind doesn't see a way out, but it does with this word. And I'm forever grateful for my part in your experiment. And with that said, I thank you, and I want to turn it over to Gail. And Gail's muted.
So maybe we could all unmute at the moment. And for mostly the rest of the session now. Thank you, Terry, so much. That was really well. Thank you, Penny, for bringing Terry and doing that work with him for a year. It's exciting to be a little close to it that way, and for all that you've given us today. So let's just take a second here just to kind of put our hand on the heart. I like that fit. Let's put our hand there and then kind of breathe in a little bit of something that we remember that was particularly powerful for us. Terry's given us a lot. So maybe we'll first give back something that he gave to us to kind of give back our thoughts and our appreciation for any particular thing that he said or idea or something that made you kind of come out of your cartoon self.
To see with golden eyes and to help others by spiraling them up.
I like, I'm not sure if I'm on or not. Can you hear me?
Yes, we are. Hear you. Yeah.
So sorry. It was a real gift to hear this recognition of the need to shift from the teacher-student models and from this wave, if not glut, of ways of being on the internet with teachers and students, so for personal reasons at my place and time, I'm going forward not to offer another course, but to somehow develop a conversation and an experiment in conscious evolution. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Well, I have a question, if that's
Yeah.
a good time
Okay,
for that.
sure, sure.
Your WeSpace work reminds me a lot of David Nicole's subtle activism. And I was wondering, I know you've had some connection with him. What are the similarities and dissimilarities? And is there a way that we can bring these kinds of organizations together to really amplify this kind of space?
Well, I like David very much, and I think that there are just some slight, I mean, I'm not as deeply familiar with all of his work as would be necessary for me to make summary comments about it, but I have some, experience of it. And from my limited understanding, my sense is that he's really good at helping a group of people tune in at a subtle level on the field and create some kind of coherence in that field and intend blessing. And there are large, he does small and larger scale group meditations and blessings and radiating that kind of healing intention. I mean, it's got some relationship to what Lynn McTaggart does, for instance, with her power of intention. He calls it subtle activism because he really cares to see the world itself change. And I think that as we become more awake to the psychophysical nature of existence, the fact that it is not merely objective, but it's not merely subjective, it's interactively co-creating itself. The sense that we can intervene sometimes through pure intention, I think is valid. I think what we're doing with our WeSpace is different in a number of ways. One of them is we bring our whole selves. A big principle of how we relate and how I show up is to admit that we're cartoon characters and that we are human and we're embodied, and we do not try to look good. We do not try to, there are all kinds of habits of how people relate to one another that it is as if unconsciously we think that there are more spiritual or idealized parts of ourselves that are the best parts, and that those are the ones that should be on display only. And in a subtle way, we create a line, and the parts of ourselves that are below that line are not invited into the space. And I think that we're really good at creating a space that invites the totality of people's humanity. And I think that another difference is that we're not believing that our activism is necessarily primarily subtle or primarily gross. I hope everybody will be volunteering time and money and doing things in order to affect more voter registration and better results from our electoral process, even though what I'm good at is in a different domain. And so I think that this holistic understanding of activism as including the subtle, but not necessarily emphasizing it over other things is part of what we do. I also think that our WeSpace is more actively interested in the direct empowerment and catalyzing of felt intimacy. Many times people in our experiments, I've done things a little bit like this, it's evolved over time, but even things that I set in motion 9 years ago, there are groups of people continuing to meet with each other because the depths of the friendships that are formed become enduring. And if you're finding your way into your pure consciousness and love and all these universals, and you resonate with people, you don't necessarily build that kind of personal friendship. And I think that's a big difference. I think also there's a sense that everything I do I hardly ever use the word integral anymore, because there's this association with Ken Wilber and big abstract plans and head intelligence, and some people react to that. I just don't need to have that conversation. But I'm totally into integral in a certain way, which is everything's paradoxical. You point out the subtle and then you point out the gross. And is this the bottom line or is that? No, they're both the bottom line. Everything is always multidimensional and co-creative, and to truly think holistically and to truly operate holistically, we're going to have to hold a lot of paradoxes. So our we space has this, you know, there's a tenderness, but there's also a commitment to making a difference. We have to come into integrity with our great-grandchildren's generation, and we're not. And that's up. But the urgency can cause us to close down. And because we're urgent, we become impatient with one another, and we become incoherent. Our urgency becomes judgment. So to be able to hold many of these paradoxes at once, that's what I think is truly integral. And that's what I've tried to do in the way we create the, and the nice thing about this is, like, we share our total secret sauce. You want to experience this? Read the section on WeSpace with, do it with each other. You'll get it. It's not, I mean, I do my best to transmit something that's really worthwhile, and I hope people will continue to want to benefit from that. But this has got to go viral. This has got to scale. This has got to find its way into the water supply and really change the world. So what we believe is that this is a field of study. The field of study is how to be next stage human beings. And everybody's working on it a little bit in one way or another. But the field is not self-aware. And the way the field really progresses is through action inquiry, learning by doing, not abstract philosophical, or even abstract scientific research. It's done in the doing and the sharing of best practices. So what we hope is that this book is going to make a bunch of people say, yeah, we call it the field of intentional cultural evolution. Yeah, I'm part of that field of intentional cultural evolution. I'm trying to be the change with my friends. There's something we discovered that is different and additional to what Terry wrote about in that book. Terry and Friends, this is by Siobhan McClory and Kristen Noth and the whole community, in addition to me. They will, what will begin to happen in my, my prayer is that lots of people will recognize they're part of this. The field will become self-aware. The exchange of best practices will upgrade and upgrade, and we're going to begin to reach a critical threat. We're going to get beyond a critical threshold of coherence, where the way we're loving each other into effectiveness breaks gravity, and we start really making, it goes through culture, like, powerfully. So that's my theory of change.
I think I hear you saying, and I'm finding the words fascinating, that the field needs to be more self-aware, which suggests to me that the field is a consciousness that's much larger than any individual consciousness, and that we are all part of. And as we become aware of it, it changes us, and we all become more, united in our intentionality or in our work. Is that what you're saying?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Nicely put.
I like that.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Let's see how much time. That's probably about time to wrap up.
I think Beth was going to ask a question.
Oh, good. All right. Where's Beth? Please.
I can't hear you though, Beth. I don't know why.
Oh, there. Beth. Oh, dear. Beth, we can't hear you. And she's on mute. And now you're on mute, but still your microphone isn't up, or look down in the corner, the left-hand corner. There may be something that says mute there or something. that you can click
No,
on.
she's unmuted on Zoom. She might be mute. She might just
That's
have
what
a
I mean,
bad
yeah.
connection to her mic or something.
Yeah. Or there's all these internal things in the computer that are going to go wrong.
Yeah,
Still can't.
darn.
Beth,
If you want to type, well, I'm going to
type into the chat. Beth, see the chat down there? Put it in the chat and we'll read it. Easier. Okay. All right, I think she's resigned. Oh, all right. Too bad. Well, she's going to write. That's it. Okay. Maybe while she's working on it, Rick would like to add something.
Terry, the COVID-19 is going to be with us for over a year, I'm sure, and people are already getting Zoom fatigue. And could you comment on how we can keep this momentum going without face-to-face, other than through Zoom? Because there's so many elements that need to come together. I mean, we're talking about cultural, Black Lives Matter, the spiritual, the economics, all the dysfunctions of our healthcare system, our distribution systems, all these sorts of things. I'm sure you've given thought to this, but any words about that?
We're in a, everything is radically changing, and it's going to change partly through the COVID pandemic and partly through the other things, certainly the unsustainability of the cruelties of white supremacy. There's a whole variety of things that are at a crucial boiling point. And from a conventional point of view, it's apocalyptic. It's not going to work out. I had a very rich dialogue in my podcast, State of Emergence, with Meg Wheatley, who you may be aware of. And Meg is completely, like, her point of view is, let us become warriors for the human spirit and let us show up for this disaster that is in progress and just hold people and defend what is good or true or beautiful as much as we can while it all goes extinct, because there's no hope. And I didn't quite go along with that. I feel like it is a quantum reality and quantum social change is possible. But I think that it's going to take a no matter what commitment. So I'm going to do my best to be and to do the wholeness that is possible, that would turn it around if it could be turned around, no matter what. And that is the thing that will hold and help people, even if we are, and think about this, okay? Maybe we're living in the time in which we can redeem our relationship and our integrity with our great-grandchildren's generation, and we can actually, miracles can come out of this. And maybe we're the last generations to, and look what we are the generations who get to see all the images from the Hubble telescope, get to see the vast tapestry of cosmic evolution becoming biological evolution, becoming cultural evolution. We're the ones who are inheriting all the wisdom traditions of man in conversation with one another at the same time, for the first time, and the methods of science. This whole evolutionary process seemingly wanted to become self-aware, and it is becoming self-aware in a remarkable way that it never has before through us. And if we're given that, then we dishonor it by merely contracting and thinking there's a problem. Somehow this is glorious and amazing. If it's apocalyptic and it just, a bunch of death, what we experience is cleaning up other people's corpses before we fall exhausted in the process and cross over ourselves, you know what? There's nobility in that. Let us not question this gift. We are being given an opportunity that is epochal, like on an evolutionary scale, and finding a way to inherit everything that is good and true and beautiful about this whole human adventure, and magnify that and bless each other into our most activated expressions. Yes, thank you. I'm grateful. You know, let's just say yes to that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. In creation spirituality, we have the 4 paths. And the path of things falling apart is absolutely necessary for new orders and things to be created. It happens. It's happened since the beginning of time. For me, here we are, letting go of stuff. So a new life can come. But here we have a question. Yeah.
But Beth's written question?
Yes. You want to read it? I was going to read it.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay, from Beth. My question is about the shadow within our culture and how we hold the extremely destructive and hateful elements that are very empowered right now. How do we hold and welcome and give love to people and also speak truth and set limits to these elements? How do we hold and welcome and give love to people and also speak truth and set limits to these elements?
That's real work, and
That's your easy last answer question.
Yeah, there's no simple answer. There's no formulaic answers to any of this. This is real work, and you have to keep showing up for it, and it requires kind of big-hearted, resourceful agility again and again. When people ask me how to talk to their hateful uncle, I usually say, well, don't talk about what they're talking about on cable news. Just find the things that you like in that person and speak to where you have common values and see if you can re-knit the fabric of your connection with that one individual, because that's the beginnings of sanity. As far as there is violent, functional, we could call it functional evil. I don't really believe in evil, but there is a psychopathy and sociopathy and a deep cynicism that are diseases, and they're very critically alive in our culture. And we really have to find a space in our heart for all of humanity and a kind of trust of the larger process. Even as on another level, we're sort of, there are apparent moments when it really does seem like the forces of light and the forces of darkness are in a kind of dialogue, and you want to let that light shine more powerfully. And I think, I usually say, there's 2 things I'm for and there's 2 things I'm against. The 2 things I'm for are repentance and forgiveness, and the 2 things I'm against are psychopathy and cynicism. And I think it's fine to just go ahead and be against a certain amount of that. And yet, what is it to be skillful in opposing it? It's usually first begins with befriending. And there really is a profound alchemical and deep kind of a process. A lot that is ugly is being surfaced and is being activated, and it needs to be healed. Trauma needs healing. All of it is an expression of trauma. And so, that great saying by Neem Karoli Baba, never put anyone out of your heart, is really essential. So, so there's somebody I think about way too much who I really don't like, and he's the president. And how do I deal with that? Well, he seems pretty ugly and benighted in a lot of ways. And it seems like he needs to be pretty much defeated and neutralized. And I wouldn't probably be that upset if I heard he had a heart attack and died. On the other hand, I want for him that he gets a chance to grow and to heal and to reckon with his contradictions. And so in that way, I'm not putting him out of my heart. And sometimes it's a little bit of a wrestling match to find a way to do that, but I think that's the practice.
Wow. Thank you, Terry, so much.
Yeah, we're at the end. Yeah.
And we will close with Terry's Transrational Prayer.
Okay,
If you feel complete.
I would love to offer a transrational prayer, just a brief one. So in integral spirituality, they say there's three faces of God: the I amness of first person, the it of the body of nature and what we notice philosophically, and the you. And even with a non-dual orientation, we are relational beings. And in that sense, the God who is us is our most fundamental beloved. And so I love to pray. I turn to you, you who are the conscious light that is every cell in every body on this Zoom call. Thank you. Please help me to open in ever deepening amazement and gratitude in your presence. Please help all of us relax open so that your radiant transcendental blessing pervades every bit of every one of us, so that with every moment of our hearts beating and our bodies breathing, we conduct more and more of your remarkable, amazing, divine blessing into this world. Help us love others. Help us be your hands and feet. Be before us in the moments when we are closest to despair, the living God, radiant, conscious, beyond our understanding. Let us immerse ourselves in you so that in our dying, we merely surrender open into you. Let us be you, now and now and now forever. Thank you.
Wow.
And Terry has a practice at the end. And can you invite us into that practice where we all bring our voices forth in however you word that?
Oh, you mean the way we complete our sessions in the social experiment? Well, I just invite everybody to make sure you've turned on your video and then to turn on your audios and just say goodbye and look upon one another and love each other and feel complete in being together. It's just warm and loving. So goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Well,
See you. Stay
safe.
well.
Thank you.
Lovely
Bye.
to meet your practice community.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye, evolutionaries.
Mm.
Bye.
Bye.
So goes the wee space.
There goes the wee space. It's disappearing.
Like bubbles.
Did we lose Gail? I mean, Penny?
We might have lost Penny.
We lost Penny already. Oh, well, we'll check
Okay.
in later then.
Talk later.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone else. I'm gonna do it right here. So I say goodbye.